First things first, I just want to say Happy New Year's to everyone. Welcome to 2024. It's going to be a great year. I can feel it in my bones. Not a bad thing is going to happen this year, and you can bank on that. Next, I would like to thank everyone who subscribed or watched my videos or commented or given me any support because it means a lot to me. I started doing this about a month ago, and it has already just gone beyond my wildest dreams of what could happen in the first month, and I have all of you to thank for that. And finally, what this video is about is me, because of course I'm that important, but it's my story of how I ended up an atheist. Was I always religious? I did come from a religious family, as I have mentioned before. Or did I always just not believe it anyway? Well, we're going to answer that question, but first, let's talk about my family. I was born and raised in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, rural coal country type of area, homogeneously Christian conservative when I was a child, and of course, I was naturally immersed in it. Not by choice. If I ever had a choice, I would have said, well, leave me out of it, because I was never into it. I never bought it, I never believed it. So that answers the first question really quick. But let me tell you about the family that I come from. You see, my dad was an assistant pastor of a church his dad built about 100 years ago now. He wasn't the only one building it, but he was a significant part in building it. They were Free Will Baptists, you see. I don't know much about what the Free Will Baptist ideology is, but they started in the Northeast and spread to the South and then split over slavery. It seems most of the Kentucky branches were against slavery, and most of the ones south of that were in favor of slavery. So there's some deep lore for you about a branch that barely even exists today. It's really small. And anyway, my dad, after being an assistant pastor, decided to do some other things. He started a TV show, a Christian TV show. That's right, my dad was a Christian televangelist. So you could say this sort of thing runs in my blood. He started about 1995, and it continued until about 2007. The reason why it didn't keep going indefinitely is because my dad is not the kind of guy to beg poor people for their last dollars. You know, televangelists, they live on that stuff. My dad was unwilling to do it. Therefore, he could not continue past a certain point. The costs became too high, and he was totally unwilling to help them just scheme money out of innocent people. So I got to give him my respect there, even though we disagree heavily on everything from politics to religion to philosophy and everything in between. But that's not all he did. He actually has done quite a lot. He was a gospel singer along with my mom. They were traveling gospel singers at that, helped out by the TV show. My dad was a traveling preacher, usually at Baptist churches, but sometimes Methodist, sometimes Pentecostal. And it was quite the experience growing up in these churches and the TV studio. Honestly, the churches I didn't like at all, ever, at any point. But the TV studio I loved. I thrived there. That was my place. I enjoyed taking the opportunity to mess up as many takes as I possibly could by being too loud at exactly the right time. I only ever appeared on the show about 3 times myself, and I only spoke once that I'm aware of, only to say hi to a friend, so that tells you how involved I was in all of that. Anyway, eventually my dad became pastor of that church about 10 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. He had left it for about 10 years, just jumped around other churches, and finally settled on that one. He still runs it. It's a very important part of their lives, and, you know, more power to him, I guess. Not my thing, but every now and then I'll pop in to say hi to some old faces. They're really nice people. I'm sure politically we don't agree on anything, but they're nice people. There's a good chess player in the church. I go to church sometimes just to play chess, actually, and get a good game in. So that tells you a lot already about the kind of childhood and teenage years that I had. I never bought it. I never bought the Christianity thing. When I heard the idea of God mentioned seriously, it was kind of laughable. I never bought anything I learned in the churches, and the more stories I learned, the more ridiculous and implausible it all sounded. It probably helps that I had a natural bent towards science and skepticism, and I found Carl Sagan very early. I read the first Carl Sagan book that I read in my life when I was about 5 years old. And it was a life-changing moment because suddenly the universe had explanations that didn't rely on a magic man in the sky dictating the universe to his will and doing a bunch of crazy shit like killing all of humanity that one time and doing it again in the future, apparently. So I never bought it, and it was a point of continual conflict. I started questioning more openly in my teenage years. First, it started out with evolution, because the Pentecostals and the Baptists love talking about evolution, never anything remotely good. And of course, I would question them and be like, well, how do you know it didn't happen? Have you seen the evidence? And they'd be like, oh, come on, we didn't come from no monkeys. But in fact, we sort of did. But I digress. It's a very interesting subject, but we'll save that for later. But there were just increasing conflicts. Finally, at 14, I came out as agnostic, but nobody knew what that meant, so I very quickly came out again a year later as an atheist. I tried to stop going to church, but of course I was still under the custody of my parents, so I had to do whatever they said. Until I was 16. One day, I had skipped church for about 4 weeks, and I finally decided, you know what, I've had enough. So one day, my dad yells for me, says it's been 4 weeks, you need to go to church. And I just ignored him, and he comes up the stairs and says, come on, you gotta get up, you gotta go, it's been 4 weeks. And I said, I don't care if you beat me, I'm not going. He seemed a little bit taken aback by that, probably because he knew I was serious. And he started to go on this spiel about our faith. And I stopped him and I said, but I don't share your faith, so why should I have to do something that doesn't benefit me in any way? And of course, he had no real response to that, so I said, I'm going back to bed. And I turned over and went to bed, and that was the last time I set foot in a church service. To the present day, I'm currently 33 years old, so it's been half my life since I was in a church service. And frankly, my life has been better because of it. Because you see, more than all of the anti-science stuff, a lot of the hatred you'd hear in the churches just rubbed me the wrong way. Hatred against gay people, against women, you name it, they didn't like it. Nowadays, it's probably trans people and Democrats, but back in the 90s, there were still a lot of Democrats in the churches. So, priorities have changed somewhat. They all support Trump now, even though they would have considered him a debased, immoral man just a few years earlier. And it's quite sad for all of them. I hate to see them fall into this stuff. Flat Earth is gaining popularity among them for some reason now. And it's just been a long, storied history with me and the churches. It's just been a constant battle with my family, sort of. Eventually, they got used to the idea of having a child that was an atheist, and they found out that being an atheist doesn't mean that you are going to be a dangerous, harmful, hateful person, and so they came to accept it. In fact, this is going to sound a little bit arrogant, perhaps, but it's not my judgment or estimation of self. But at this point, my parents would consider me to be a great person. Now, I don't really. I think I'm just a person with flaws like everybody else, but to them, I'm pretty much a saint, except for not being religious. It's a very interesting outcome, especially because I have siblings who are a lot more religious than I have ever been, fully into the Christianity thing, and they are not treated nearly as well. They are also women, which might tell you something about my family dynamics. I am the golden child, despite being a queer atheist heathen. And a Democrat, which is even worse than those things, let's be honest. To these people, a Democrat's about the worst thing you can be. Forget atheism, forget queerness, transness. A Democrat. Terrible stuff, huh? So let's get down to brass tacks here. What is my spiritual experience? What was my spirituality like? Well, there never was any. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone. No, I'm just messing around. But it's true, there really wasn't anything like that for me. I think there are natural atheists and natural nihilists, and I just happen to be one of them for whatever reason. Maybe it's because I'm an inherently skeptical person. Maybe it's because logic has always been very important to me. I don't know what causes it. I know that I am very much an anomaly in this family, but my nephew actually is also kind of a natural atheist. So I'm not alone in that regard. But it is a very isolating experience because I can't understand a lot of the things that many of you will understand, having once been religious, maybe believed it with all your hearts, and then deconverted or deconstructed. Dan Barker is a good example of this. Dan Barker today is an atheist. He runs the Freedom from Religion Foundation with his wife. They do very good work, by the way. I encourage you to check out their work and see if you can work with them or donate. They do a great job. But Dan Barker was a Christian, a fundamentalist Christian, an evangelical for a great portion of his life. It's just that alongside his innate spirituality came an innate skepticism. So eventually that skepticism turned on his own religion. He came to the conclusion there is no God, at least not the biblical God, and probably not any others. He became an atheist, but yet, even to this day, he can put himself in a prayerful mind and pray and feel the things he used to feel as a Christian, even though he doesn't even believe in God anymore. That experience for me is totally unrelatable. I relate to the logical, skeptical side of his person, but the spiritual depth I cannot relate to in any way. Now, I'm not saying I've never felt anything transcendent. I've done mushrooms before. It's pretty transcendent. But more than that, I love nature. I love walking around. I love hiking. I love lakes. It's all so beautiful. You can't help but feel something in your soul, in your spirit, as it were, which is not a real thing, by the way. But you can't help but feel something. And looking at the stars, when you can see them, when you're not in New York City, it's a very beautiful experience. I've been transfixed by the moon. I love a blue sky. Seeing these things fills me with a joy and ecstasy I can only imagine is somewhat similar to the religious experience. But I wouldn't know because I've never had the experience. And that's fine, I guess. I don't really care a whole lot. But if you came from religion yourself, you have something I don't. If you experienced those kinds of spiritual feelings, if you were dedicated to the cause, as it were, to the religious experience, you had something that I've never had. And that's pretty cool, I think. We can't all be the same. I appreciate people who were just, they weren't given this natural atheism and just found their way out of religion themselves. That's a brave and powerful thing, and I admire it greatly. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the likes and the comments. I appreciate it all more than you can imagine. And I haven't told the whole story, just a great deal of it. So I may revisit my story occasionally to fill in some more blanks. There are certainly a lot more blanks than that. I just wanted to give a basic overview of my life and my life experiences because it is interesting, and I hope that you can relate in some way, and I hope that you feel seen. If you're like me, if you're not like me, I just hope you feel seen by this video. So Happy New Year, and I hope it's an amazing one for you. See the pain I felt inside.